Welcome. My name is Robin Baker. I serve as president of George Fox University here in Newberg, Oregon, in the northwest corner of the state, a beautiful area. And if you're watching this, I'm sure you're thinking about, should my son or daughter come to a Christian college? And what would that be like? Well, first, we're just excited that you would consider sending your child, or at least encouraging them to be a part of a Christian university, especially George Fox. But let me talk to you a little about what does it mean to be at a Christian college or to engage in a Christian college experience. So what makes a university Christian? You might think that's a funny question, but there are a lot of different perspectives and a lot of universities that operate in different ways that think of themselves as Christian places. So in my mind, there are four ways or four models that universities approach what it means to be a Christian institution and how they think about engaging students in what it really means to be a Christian. So I'm going to talk with you about four models of engagement. So first, one might term this moral commitment. So if you think in those terms, there's a lot of universities that really are trying to produce people of character, that have ethical commitments, that are oriented towards values. And so that might mean that they have a commitment to character-based building on classical Western values. But in that context, there's no real emphasis on spiritual formation or on Christian truth. Now, when I talk about these various institutions, I never mean to make negative or disparaging comments about the way they approach things. I'm just trying to suggest these are different ways they think about it. So institutions that are committed to developing moral character in their students are institutions like Pacific Lutheran University. Over time, it was rooted in Christianity. But more recently, their commitment is really just to the values of Western society and Western culture. There's no real emphasis on spiritual formation or Christian truth, and I think they would think about that way if you ask them as well. Another interesting way, and one that's pretty common, that universities will think about the engagement of Christianity, we might term dualistic. Well, what does that mean? Well, there's a couple of different ways to think about it. So for example, there are a lot of parents who think that you can go to a state university and you can still get Christian exposure, or you can be encouraged in your faith. And that's certainly true. So Oregon State is the institution I know the best here around us. And at Oregon State, they have places like the Logos House, where you're surrounded by Christians who have a similar commitment to you. You have a person who runs the house that's deeply committed to Christ and is committed to your spiritual formation. So you can attend a place like Oregon State and still be encouraged in your faith and still move forward in that sense of biblical knowledge and engagement. But where it falls apart is the university itself is separate from Christianity by definition. In fact, in many cases, hostile. So you'll never really see Christian faith encouraged in the classroom, in that sense of thinking about, how does my walk with Christ affect the way I see history or science or sociology? Whatever the academic discipline might be, I'm not going to get exposure to that at a place like a state university, even though I can still grow in my faith. There are Christian colleges too, who you might think take more of a dualistic approach. In fact, my own experience at a place called Grand Canyon University was more like that in many ways, and it's certainly true today. So what would that mean at a Christian college? Well, for a lot of people, Christianity is expressed in Bible studies, in chapel, in prayer meetings, even in mission trips, all really powerful things and experiences that directly affect your walk with Christ. Absolutely true. So for those institutions, biblical and spiritual engagements, what I would call, it's an add-on. It's an add-on to the classroom itself. It's things that I learn co-curricularly outside the classroom. So the curricular experience at those institutions is isolated from the pursuit of biblical truth. It's just different. They may have Christians in the classroom, they may have Christians who are part of the campus, but they don't always think about, how does my faith influence the way I see the world? So again, whether you're at a state university or at some Christian colleges like Grand Canyon, faculty at Grand Canyon may or may not be Christians, and for them the pursuit of truth in the classroom is not necessarily a Christian pursuit. And I don't mean to suggest it's a wrong thing, it's just simply a different thing. So Dualistic, whether at a state university or at a Christian college, is about adding the experience of Christ outside the classroom. So that when you begin to think about what it means to be a Christian institution, it can mean, as I've suggested, a variety of things, right? Then the last group I'm kind of going to deal with is formed in two capacities. This group I'm going to refer to as an integrative community. And it really develops in two different ways. Integration within a closed community is the first one I wanted to mention. Well, what does that mean? Well, there are a couple of colleges nationally, many colleges nationally actually, and one locally that might provide good examples of what that might mean. So Wheaton College and Corbin University really take similar approaches in this way to forming a Christian community. Well, what do I mean by that? All students sign a statement of faith. Only Christians are part of the community. So that for those institutions, spiritual formation, the pursuit of truth, occurs within what we would term a closed community. In fact, you can see on my slide, it's a joke obviously, parking for Christians, all others have to wait until the rapture to become a part. Meaning that their community is structured in such a way to say, only the people that sign this particular statement of faith can be a part of this community as a whole. So their Christian community is narrower than the last category I'm going to talk about. So that if you go to Wheaton or you go to Corbin, their emphasis is on preparing leaders for the church exclusively. Because you have to be a person of faith to be a part, whether a professor or a student. So in that context, it can be a really powerful mission, and it's integrative, but it's different. The last category is the one that really represents George Fox University. It's the one I'm deeply committed to. And it's integrative in a really powerful way, just like Wheaton and Corbin, but not in the sense of the community itself. At a place like George Fox, everyone is invited into the community from a student's perspective. So if you are a person of faith, certainly want you to be part of the institution. And we have a statement of faith and a statement of commitment or lifestyle that everyone has to understand. But you don't have to believe in order to be a part. The only people that have to believe to be a part are the staff and the faculty. So from our perspective, the formation and the integration are going to occur by the way in which we approach things, the way we work with students, what we do, we might say. So to use C.S. Lewis's famous, this comes from an essay he wrote called Theology as Poetry. I believe in Christianity as I believe that the sun has risen, not only because I see it, but because by it I see everything else. For Lewis, integration was penultimate, meaning everything existed within an approach. Once I become a Christian, it affects the way I view history, it affects the way I write, it affects the way I do science. So that a Christian institution that's going to be truly integrative is going to take its faculty and staff, it's going to develop those faculty and staff, and it's going to help them understand that the way in which we perceive Christ, the way in which we invite Christ in, not only changes our heart, but it changes our minds. And it affects the way we actually engage each of the subjects. So in that kind of context, that's how the classroom at a place like George Fox is going to be different. We're defined not by the nature of the community we serve, not by who we admit, but we're defined by the Christian staff and faculty who thoroughly integrate the Christian pursuit of truth and the spiritual formation of each person in the community into our lives. So in that context, in all of the various institutions I've served, I found George Fox to be one of the most vibrant places as a place that not only develops the spirit and the heart, but also is deeply committed to developing the mind. So our mission, George Fox University, is a Christ-centered community. Christ-centered in the sense of the staff and the faculty who come here, that prepares students spiritually, academically, and professionally to think with clarity, to act with integrity, and to serve with passion. Our vision is to be the Christian university of choice, known for empowering students to achieve exceptional life outcomes. And within that, our purpose is to educate and inspire students to pursue God's calling. So one of the things I'd like to emphasize is that George Fox's purpose has been the same since our beginning, that our founders really thought about what it meant to be Christian and how they were going to work with students in that kind of context. So for example, if we go back to the 1891 catalog, which is the very first year of George Fox. Now at the time, George Fox was called Pacific College. It was later renamed in the 1950s, George Fox. It read this way: Pacific College, which is now George Fox, seeks to be definitely and positively Christian. But notice how they define it. It seeks to bring its students to an acceptance of Jesus Christ as personal Savior and Lord. It seeks to help its students to a definite dedication of life to the service of Christ and to that incoming of the Divine Spirit, without whose help the fullest service to God and to humanity is impossible. It seeks to assist its students to find their work in life and at least begin their definite preparation for it. It emphasizes constantly the ideal of service rather than selfishness, and of character as well as scholarship. A couple things I want you to remember from that statement. If you're an open community, it's really important that you bring your students to an acceptance of Christ, and that's part of our goal. If you're a closed community, it doesn't matter. Everybody already is Christian. So from our beginning, we actually invited everyone to be a part of George Fox, and it was part of our purpose to tell them who Jesus was so that they might come to a saving knowledge of His faith. So that was an essential part of who we are. The second part of that you're going to find that's real later in this conversation is that we help students find their work in life and their vocational calling in Christ. Dynamic part of the mission. Then just a little bit later, in 1896, just slightly different, the purpose of the college is to offer to young men and women the benefits of a liberal Christian education. Not liberal in the sense of like not Christian, obviously, but liberal in the sense of broad. Its courses of study are arranged to give that broad culture which should be the possession of every intelligent man and woman. The founders recognized the great importance of religious training, and the work of the classroom is not merely consistent with Christianity, but decidedly Christian in its tendencies. So notice from the very beginning, they were committed to the fact that this is going to be an integrative place. That in the academic community, in the classroom, it was going to be decidedly Christian. We were going to see Christ and the way He was manifested in the academic discipline itself. It's the fond hope of the management, that's me, that Pacific College shall send forth many Christian teachers, ministers, and missionaries, and that it shall be a strong support not only to the church that founded George Fox, the Friends, but to Christianity wherever its influence may reach, and that's the broad vocations. At George Fox, lots of programs, more than 60 undergraduate programs and 8 pre-professional programs. Our largest programs are nursing, engineering, business, kinesiology, and biology. Now, important in our conversation is that George Fox basically says to our students and to our community, God calls people into all of life, not just to be ministers, not just to be music people in a church, but He calls us to use our vocation to bring about His kingdom as He seeks to bring His kingdom here. And so our programs are drawing Christians, faculty who want to develop nurses and engineers and business people and doctors and lawyers and others who will be agents of salt for God's kingdom in their communities. So you'll not only see undergraduate programs at George Fox, you'll also see graduate programs in behavioral health, in business, in healthcare, and in a seminary. Our adult degree programs, we have 7 accelerated, fully online programs that serve the needs of people of all ages. So in the fall of 2023, we enrolled over 4,000 students, almost 2,300 on the undergraduate side and 1,800 in grad and adult degree programs. We're recognized in all kinds of national journals, Wall Street, Oregon's #1 private college, and of course U.S. News and World Report. So we think that George Fox is the premier Christian university in the Pacific Northwest because of what we do with students, not simply because of what people think about us. So thank you for thinking about George Fox University and the type of education that we offer here in a truly integrative capacity to meet the needs of students for the future. One of my favorite authors as I close is Dietrich Bonhoeffer. You probably know him, but if you don't, Bonhoeffer was one of the most famous ministers of the Second World War. He was a German, and in his own development, he came to the point where he could no longer encourage support of the system that emerged in Germany that we often refer to now as the Nazi culture. And so Bonhoeffer led the opposition to Adolf Hitler and his system. And one of his key complaints was there weren't enough Germans who stood up to the political system of the Nazis. And so he asked the question, why not? And he wrote this book called After 10 Years, A Reckoning, in which he reflected to his family on why one of the most developed cultures in the Western world had not only led to the recognition of the Nazi system and that Nazi system controlling it, but most people accepted it. And for Bonhoeffer, that was an unacceptable choice. So he asked this question, who stands fast? In other words, who keeps their commitments in the face of tremendous opposition, of the emergence of people who don't share your values, and to the extent in Nazi Germany of who actually work in opposition to your values. So who can stand in the face of that type of pressure? And Bonhoeffer answered the question this way. He said, only the person whose final standard is not his reason, his principles, his conscience, his freedom, or his virtue, but the individual who's ready to sacrifice everything when he or she is called to obedient and responsible action in faith and in exclusive allegiance to God. The responsible person who tries to make his whole life an answer to the question and call of God. And he finishes by asking this question, where are these responsible people? Now, we're not in World War II, but the challenges remain the same. So I would argue to you that George Fox University is the kind of place that produces people who stand fast, who understand that the bottom line is their life is to be lived as an answer to the question and call of God. And that occurs in the development at a community like this. Thank you for considering us.